Good day, welcome to Pfrs, one of the fastest growing world's dominant coffee shop team chain over a decade, the world's leader in the field of food and beverages industry. Good day, I am Ms. Brigonia, the Chief Executive Officer of Pfrs. My team includes Ms. Alpe, the Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Capili, the Chief Marketing Officer, Mr. Panjalan, one of the Senior Vice President Corporate Development. I arranged this meeting because I just want to update everyone regarding with our company's financial reporting process. This agenda is about different Philippine financial reporting standards that we shall consider for consistent recording, recognizing, and measuring of our financial transaction through the intended Philippine financial reporting standard assigned to us, and the standard we chosen to apply, which if we followed properly, will ensure stability and financial reporting process of our company. With that, each of us prepares a little discussion regarding the agenda and the thing that is needed to disclose today. Our first presenter is our Chief Financial Officer. Please welcome Ms. Alpe. She is about to tackle on how our company discloses the interest in other entities, which is under Philippine Financial Reporting Standard 12. Second presenter is our Chief Marketing Officer and Senior Vice President Corporate Development. Please welcome Mr. Panjalan and Ms. Capili. They cover the principles we use in measuring fair value, specifically Philippine Financial Reporting Standard 13. And lastly, my presentation, your CEO, all about how regulatory account balances are accounted for when an entity is subjected to rate regulations under Philippine Financial Reporting Standard 14. Okay, let's proceed. Please be familiarized with the main points of discussions. Thank you.
Pfrs 12. Disclosures of interest in other entities. The objective of Pfrs 12 is to prescribe the minimum disclosure requirements for an entity's interest in other entities, particularly the nature of those interests and risks associated with those interests, and the effects of those interests on the entity's financial statements. So, how can we say that I have an interest in another entity? As you can see, an entity does not necessarily have an interest in another entity just because of a typical customer-supplier relationship. For example, you are the supplier and I am the customer. Do you think it works like that? No, it doesn't work like that. For you to be able to have an interest in another entity, you must obtain a control, joint control, or significant influence over other entities. Scope. Pfrs 12 only applies to entities that have an interest in a subsidiary, joint arrangement, associate, or unconsolidated structured entity. Pfrs 12 does not apply to an interest in another entity that is accounted for in accordance with Pfrs 9 or financial instruments. Why? Because there are certain interests in joint ventures held by an entity that does not share in joint control, and majority of interests in another entities are accounted for in accordance with IFRS 9 financial statements. Now, let's proceed to the summary of minimum disclosures under Pfrs 12. Significant judgments and assumptions. An entity discloses information about significant judgments and assumptions that it has made in determining the significant influence, control, joint control over another entity, with which type of joint arrangements and its structure. Investment entity status. An entity that obtains funds, commits to its investors, measures and evaluates the performance of all its investments. As you can see, these scenarios give emphasis to the what we call joint control, or significant influence over another entity. These are the following informations that requires disclosures for an entity's interest in a subsidiary. Composition of the group, the type, nature, and extent of significant restrictions on the entity's ability to access assets and settle liabilities of the group. And for some instances, a subsidiary might use a different reporting period. The entity will disclose the fact and reason related to the changes. Here, we discuss the following information that requires disclosures for our entity's interests in joint arrangements and associates that are material. Like the previous one, the composition of the group also requires to be disclosed in joint arrangements and associates. Nature of relationship, ownership interest, measurement and fair value of the investments, dividends, and summarized financial information. These are also the amounts from a material joint venture that require disclosure, the amount of cash and cash equivalents, current and non-current financial liabilities, depreciation and amortization, interest, income and expense, income tax or benefit. The last entity under Pfrs 12, interest in unconsolidated structured entities. So what do we mean by structured entity? It is an entity that has been designed so that voting or similar rights are not the dominant factor in deciding who controls the entity. Say for example, I have control over the administrative tasks. These tasks are only my scope. Can I involve myself on a managerial task? In general, no, but can be subjected to change if there is contractual arrangements. Last but definitely not the least, these are the following information that requires disclosures for an entity's interest in an unconsolidated structured entity.
Good day everyone, my name is Christian Marvic Fanjalang from BSA May 1. So okay, dito tayo sa next topic, which is fair value measurement or Pfrs 13. Now, familiar na sa atin ang Pfrs 13 kasi diba ilang beses na natin ito nakikita sa ibang standard. Because like impairment, this is a standard or a concept that encompasses other standards that also provides guidance to them. So, fair value measurement or Pfrs 13. So, anong learning objectives natin for this one? So, first is define fair value and second is state the principles used in measuring fair value. So, as we have seen such discussions before, Pfrs 13, ilang beses na mention yan because like impairment, it also encompasses under standards because it provides guidance for them in their valuation, in their measurement, because ayun yung main principle ni Pfrs 13. So, ano ang scope ni Pfrs 13? So, sinasabi dito na it applies to the fair value, measurement, and related disclosures of an asset, liability, or equity when other Pfrs require measurement at fair value or fair value less cost to sell. Kaya sinasabi natin kapag sinabi ng standard na fair value or fair value less cost, ang gagamitin ay papasok si Pfrs 13 because ayun yung kanyang expertise or sa kanya tayo lalapit. So ngayon, ano nga ba tong fair value? So fair value is the price that would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability in an orderly transaction between market participants at the measurement's date. So yun daw, kung anong marireceive mo pag nagbenta ka ng asset, kung anong babayaran mo to transfer liability, kung ano yung napagkasunduan basically in an orderly to transaction between market participants, yun yung mako-consider as fair value. Another name of political meeting is market value. Kasi market value, yun yung perceived value ng market na meron. Kung ano yung perceived value, kung ano yung perceived ng market over that. So, in this case, similar kung ano yung perceived value, yun yung babayaran mo, yun yung tatanggapin mo, yun yung itatransfer mo, yun yung fair value. So ngayon, paano ang measurement nito? So fair value is based on the market price of the asset in. So A, principal market, or kapag walang principal market, the most advantageous market. So dito, kapag i-compute natin ang fair value, market price in principal or most advantageous market minus the transport cost, kasi nga that is the additional expense. So the market price used in measuring fair value is not adjusted for any transaction cost. So wala. Kasama yan, pero kapag merong transport cost, adjust mo yan or bawasan mo para malaman mo ang fair value. So for the continuation of the lesson, Miss Capili will continue the discussion.
So what I'm going to tackle about is all about the transaction price versus the fair value at initial recognition. So what is fair value? Fair value is the price that would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer a liability. Fair value is also called the exit price. Transaction price is the price paid to acquire an asset or price received to assume a liability. Transaction price is also called the entry price. In many cases, the transaction price is equal to fair value. However, in case where the transaction price differs from the fair value at initial recognition, the difference is recognized as gain or loss in profit or loss, unless another Pfrs specifies otherwise. So for the valuation techniques, is when measuring fair value, Pfrs 13 requires the use of a valuation technique that is appropriate in the circumstances and for which sufficient data are available to measure fair value. Such a valuation technique maximizes the use of relevant observable inputs and minimizes unobservable inputs. Fair value measurement involves estimating the price at which asset can be sold or liability can be transferred in an orderly transaction between market participants at the measurement date and under current market conditions. As you can see, there are three boxes. They are the valuation techniques. So in the first box, we have market approach. Uses price and other relevant information generated by market transactions involving similar assets, liabilities, or group of assets and liabilities. Second box, the cost approach, reflects the amount that is currently needed to replace the service capacity of an asset. Example given is current replacement cost. And for the last box, we have income approach, converts future amount, cash flow, or income and expenses to a single current discounted amount, reflecting current market expectations about those future amounts. So now, we're going to talk about the fair value hierarchy. Pfrs 13 provides the following fair value hierarchy order of priority that categorizes the inputs to valuation techniques and use in measuring fair value into three levels. Level 1 inputs are quoted prices in active markets for identical assets or liability that the entity can access at the measurement date. What is active market? Active market is a market in which transaction, assets, or liability take place with sufficient frequency and volume to provide pricing information on an ongoing basis. A quoted market price in an active market provides the most reliable evidence of fair value and is used without adjustment to measure fair value whenever it's available. Level 2 inputs. Level 2 inputs are inputs other than the quoted price included within Level 1 that are observable for the asset or liability, either directly or indirectly. Level 2 inputs are used only when Level 1 inputs are not available. Examples of Level 2 inputs are quoted price for similar assets or liabilities in active markets, and quoted price for similar assets or liabilities in markets that are not active. A market may not be considered active if there is sufficient volume or frequency of transactions for the asset or liability. B. Prices are not current. C. Quotations may substantially over time and among market markers. And letter D. Insufficient information is released publicly. For the number 3, interest rates and yields curves observable at commonly quoted intervals, prepayment speeds, loss severities, credit risk, and default rates. Number 4 is inputs that are derived principally from or corroborated by observable market data that through correlation or other means. The last level is the Level 3 inputs. Level 3 inputs are unobservable inputs. These inputs reflect management's own assumption regarding an exit price that a market participant holding the asset or owing the liability would make. Level 3 inputs are used only when Level 1 and Level 2 inputs are not available. And for the last topic is the fair value measurement of non-financial assets. When determining the fair value of non-financial asset, an entity considers the asset's highest, best, and use in addition to the other requirement of Pfrs 13. Highest and best use is the use of a non-financial asset by market participants that would maximize the value of the asset or group of assets and liabilities within which the asset would be used. The highest and best use of non-financial assets takes into account of the following: physical characteristics of the non-financial assets, example given is location or size of the property. Second is the legal restrictions on the use of non-financial asset, example given, zoning regulations. Second is the legal restrictions on the use of non-financial asset, example given are zoning regulations applicable to the property. And lastly, the financial feasibility, whether the use of the asset generates adequate income or cash flows. That's all. Thank you.
Good day, team! Thank you for attending to this business meeting, and thank you for letting me to introduce my topic. So my presentation today is divided into 4. First is the introduction, the scope, and principles under Pfrs 14, and its presentation. Shall we start? So many industry sectors, especially utilities such as electricity, water, gas, that are subjected to rate regulations, wherein the government regulates the pricing and the supply of those goods and services. Consequently, these have the significant effect on the amount and timing of entities' revenue. So the entities need to recognize those expenses and income that are subjected to rate regulations through the use of Pfrs 14. So for the introduction, so Pfrs 14 described as for the financial reporting requirements for the sale of goods and services that are subjected to rate regulations. To further understand the scope, the importance, and the use of Pfrs 14, let's first define the important terms under Pfrs 14. So first is regulatory deferral account balances. So these are the income or expenses that are not subjected or that are not initially recorded as under asset method or liability method, since they are subjected to rate regulations. So what is rate regulations? Rate regulation, it is the price that could be set
or charged for the customers for the sale of goods and services by the rate regulators. Wherein the rate regulators, they are the authorized body that are capable of setting the rate for the customers. And rate regulated activities, these are the activities that are subjected to rate regulation. So take this example para mas magets nyo kung ano nga ba or anong scope yung PFRS 14. So, diba, when we initially record deferral accounts, deferral accounts, diba, meron tayong sinusunod na sa accounting at least 2 methods. Either asset method or liability method. Pwedeng for example, naka-receive ka ng revenue from the customers but hindi mo pa nare-render yung service. Siyempre, ang recordings natin dun is pwedeng under 2 methods, pwedeng unearned income, or income, unearned income. But under PFRS 14, those deferral accounts or mga asset natin and expenses is hindi sila pwedeng income or expenses, hindi natin siya pwedeng i-record as under asset method or liability method because may sarili silang or separate na recordings from mga deferral accounts na subjected to rate regulations. Ang tinatawag na regulatory deferral account balances kasi they are regulated na by the regulatory bodies. Take this example. So, diba, Meralco. So, Meralco is one of the best examples. Example ng entity na meron silang, under sila ng rate regulations. So, rate regulations allows the Meralco or the entity to recover specified cost and amount from the prices na tinacharge sa customers. Diba, for example, magbabayad tayo ng electricity natin or yung amount ng electricity natin. So, diba, yung amount naman yun is, biruin mo, hindi naman siya yun yung amount na, as in amount lang ng ilaw mo. Siyempre, mayroon silang rate. Kunwari, diba, alam nyo naman ang per kilowatt hour, diba, per kilowatt hour may bayad yung kuryente. Hindi lang ba siya sa amount na kinumpute mo. So, subjected siya sa mga rate na sinet ng rate regulators natin. So, diba, per kilowatt hour, kunwari nakakonsume ka ng 200 kilowatt per hour. Magkano ba ngayon ang per kilowatt hour? I think sa research ko is 8.7497 na. So, per kilowatt hour, ganun yung rate natin. So, ayun yung specified cost lang na marirecover sa'yo ng entity. So, yung charges na yon o yung mga rate na yon is na chinacharge sa mga customers for the delivery ng goods and services is set by the regulatory bodies o tatawag natin mga pwedeng government. In case na sa Meralco, I think that yung Meralco, yung rate regulators nila, yung tatawag natin Energy Regulatory Commission. So, yung charges na nare-recover ng entities from the prices na sinacharge sa customers is set by the regulatory bodies or the government at tinatawag natin regulatory or rate regulators. Then, yung prices or yung price setting from those rate regulations is tinatawag nating rate regulations. Let's move on for the scope of PFRS 14. So, as you can see or as you can notice na ang scope ng PFRS 14 is very narrow. So, sabi dyan, it is optional. So, first-time adopters are only applicable na mag-apply ng mga requirements for PFRS 14 both for their first PFRS financial statement as sa mga subsequent period. Therefore, yung mga entities na nag-a-apply na ng mga existing PFRS is hindi na pwede or prohibited na mag-apply pa ng PFRS 14. Since ang goal lang din naman ng PFRS 14 is to specify the reporting requirements for regulated activities that arises when the entity is subjected for rate regulations. And sabi din dyan na ang one goal pa ng regulatory deferral account balances or yung PFRS 14 natin is give the entity a temporary relief from the recognizing mga regulatory deferral account balances since yung mga balances na subjected sa mga or may rate regulations are presented separately and nire-recognize sila separately. So, ayun yung role or so ayun yung ginagawa ng PFRS 14. So, let's move on sa third part ng aking discussion, which is the principles under Pfrs 14. So, may mga PAS or Philippine Accounting Standard and Pfrs or Philippine Financial Reporting Standards na ginagamit under Pfrs 14. So, yung mga former or mga naunang nagamit na PAS and mga Pfrs na mga naunang na-discuss is pwede siyang i-apply under Pfrs 14 as long as significant o kailangan siya for the recognition and measurement ng regulatory deferred account balances. So, in general rule, in preparing financial statement for regulatory deferred account balances, kailangan ang entity is continuously i-apply yung previous GAAP natin o yung mga accounting policies na in-apply natin before. So, dito, hindi ka pwedeng gumamit ng previous GAAP natin if mag-change ka ng accounting policy kasi prohibited yon under Pfrs 14. So, under Pfrs 14, kailangan ka lang mag-change ng accounting policy. Ang general rule, kapag mag-change ka ng accounting policy under regulatory deferred account balances, kailangan is yung financial information natin or yung accounting policy na i-apply natin sa mga financial information natin is more relevant or less reliable or more reliable, less relevant para malaman natin kung pwede pa siya o pwede nating ipalit siya sa mga existing accounting policies natin. So, diba, if you still remember, under PAS 28, mag-change lang tayo ng accounting policy if permitted siya under Pfrs or kaya mas nag-result sa mas relevant or reliable information. Katulad lang din ng Pfrs 14, lagi natin susundan is more relevant or more reliable financial information. So, dito, it is prohibited na mag-change ka ng accounting policy based or because gusto mo lang or i-recognize mo yung mga regulatory deferred account balances. So, bawal ka mag-change ng accounting policy kapag i-recognize mo yung mga regulatory deferred account balances since nga ang gagamitin natin is yung previous GAAP natin. And, so, next is, meron tayong mga additional guidance or mga PAS or Pfrs na pwede natin gamitan under Pfrs 14. So, ano yung mga yon? So, interaction with other standards. So, ano yung mga PAS or Pfrs na pwede natin gamitin under Pfrs 14? So, una is yung past 10 or events after the reporting period. So, kailan siya ginagamit? So, it is used for the assumptions and estimate ng mga regulatory deferral account balances. So, ginagamit siya to determine kung ang information ba or whether the information na nag-occur or nag-exist at the end of the reporting period or after the reporting period but prior sa authorization ng financial statement, kung alin dun sa mga events na yon ang adjusting events and non-adjusting events. Diba, under past 10 natin, sa last discussion, or sa former discussions natin, meron tayong tatawag na adjusting events and non-adjusting events. So, sa mga adjusting events, ito yung mga events na nag-exist while preparing financial statement or at the end of the reporting period. And ito yung mga ito yung mga kailangan pang i-adjust kasi kapag hindi mo siya in-adjust, magkakaroon ka ng misstatement sa financial statement. And yung mga non-adjusting events naman, ito yung mga events na nag-occur or nag-arose after the reporting period na hindi mo na kailangan pang i-adjust yung mga events na to. So, yung mga examples ng mga adjusting event natin under past 10 is kunwari, yung mga nakadiscover ka ng mga fraud or errors sa financial statements. So, kailangan mo siyang i-adjust para hindi magkaroon misstatement sa financial statements. Sa mga regulatory deferred account balances, yung mga rates, kapag hindi mo na isama yung rates sa financial statement natin, so kailangan mo siyang i-adjust para tumugma sa financial statement. And yung mga sa non-adjusting events naman natin, ano yung mga events na hindi na kailangan i-adjust kasi hindi natin siya mababago. So, yung mga for example, mga changes in fair values, changes in tax rates, mga foreign exchange rates, mga casualty losses natin na na-incur after the reporting period, yun mga hindi natin mahahabol. So, hindi na siya kailangan hindi na siya kailangan pang i-adjust, but i-disclose na lang siya. Katulad din sa regulatory deferred account balances. So, kailangan mo doon piliin kung ano mga dapat nating i-adjust at mga hindi dapat nating i-adjust. Next is past 12 or income taxes. So, ginagamit siya if naka-recognize ka ng mga regulatory deferral account balances and naka-recognize ka doon ng mga deferred tax assets and deferred tax liabilities. So, yung mga deferred tax liabilities naman din is yung mga income taxes na payable natin for the future period. So, diba, ang mga entity naman, they are subjected to income taxes din, ayun yung ibabayad nila sa government. So, ang deferred tax asset natin is yung mga receivables naman natin na mga income taxes for future period. So, sa deferred tax asset, it is, kunwari, ikaw entity ka, tapos naggawa ka ng financial statement at the end of the reporting period. Tapos nakita mo doon na yung naka-incur ka yung entity mo ng loss. So, ikaw entitled ka na mabawasan or nagamitin yung loss na yon para mabawasan yung mga income taxes mo na ibabayad. So, pwede na yung mga binayad mo na mga income taxes or tax expenses na binayad mo binayad mo siya in advance, is pwede mo siya ma-recover ulit na magiging income taxes or under previous GAAP. So, ginagamit siya para ma-recognize mo yung mga income taxes mo, tapos ikaw as entity na may mga regulatory deferred account balances na naka-recognize ng mga deferred tax asset and deferred tax liabilities, ang tinatawag natin na mga taxable temporary differences natin is pwede na i-recognize mo siya separately. So, i-recognize sila separately sa mga account titles. So, pwede siyang either pwedeng within or separate line items or naka-separate na parang column siya or parang line, and naka-station na basic and diluted EPS natin. Lagi dun kasama yung profit or loss. Sa basic EPS, diba, ang computation niya is, or formula niya is yung profit or loss natin, ililess natin yung preferred dividends dun, and i-divide mo yun sa i-divide mo siya sa weighted average ng outstanding shares or ng weighted average ng ordinary shares. Then, sa diluted EPS naman is ang kasama din dun yung profit or loss. Yung profit or loss, i-add mo naman siya sa after tax interest expense, i-divide mo siya sa weighted average ng ordinary shares, and i-add mo yung incremental cost. So, sa under Pfrs 14, ipe-present mo siya ng under past 33 na kasama yung profit or loss, tapos gagawa ka pa ng additional na presentation nun na hindi kasama or hindi included yung profit or loss natin. So, next is the past 36 impairment of asset. So, it is used for the impairment ng mga regulatory deferral account balances. And paulit ko, sasabi sa inyo kanina na under Pfrs 14, ang ginagamit nating basis is yung previous GAAP natin or yung mga former na accounting policies natin. So, it is used as yung past 36 impairment of asset is ginagamit under Pfrs 14 to determine whether yung regulatory deferral account balances ba is kailangan mo siyang i-include sa CGU for the purpose of impairment. Diba, ang CGU or cash generating unit, it is the smallest identifiable unit ng asset or group of asset na kapag pinag-combine mo is you can generate economic cash flows or economic outflow. For example, train, yung station, yung railway tracks, yung bridge, pag pinag-combine mo sila, magkakaroon ka ng, may makaka-recognize ka ng passenger income. So, yung tatawag natin cash generating unit. So, yung gagamit siya para sa impairment ng mga regulatory deferral account balances na included sa CGU. So, paano malalaman na impaired ang isang asset kapag yung carrying amount niya is greater than sa recoverable amount mo? Business combination of Pfrs 3 business combination. It is used for the measurement and recognition ng mga regulatory deferral account balances sa isang acquiree. So, it is used whenever the entity na nag-acquire ng another business or two businesses merge as one, and may isa doon na may regulatory deferral account balances. So, yung balances na yun is also recognized sa consolidated financial statement throughout the acquisition. So, in business combination, di ba, it's either one or two company merge or two or more company merge or one company acquires another company and yung isa doon is madadetermine as parent or acquirer and yung isa doon is acquiree or subsidiary. So, if yung kunwari entity A, in-acquire niya yung entity B, yung ikaw as a parent, entity A, na meron ka mga regulatory deferral account balances. So, in effect, ikaw, marirecognize mo entity B, ikaw, subsidiary, marirecognize mo din yung mga regulatory deferral account balances na yun. Even if hindi naman talaga siya kasama sa financial statements mo or hindi ka naman under Pfrs 14. So, since na-consolidated na kayo or nag-combine na kayo, so, sa consolidated financial statement nyo, marirecognize nyo both yung regulatory deferral account balances na yun. It is true since under Pfrs 3 business combination, ang entity is may control over the accounting policies ng acquiree because of law or agreement. So, ikaw as a parent, may karapatan or meron kang right na gamitin yung accounting policies na yon or certain accounting policies sa acquirer mo, sa subsidiary mo para iisa lang din yung result ng consolidated financial statement. So, letter F is Pfrs 5 or non-current asset held for sale and discontinued operation. Ito, any regulatory deferral account balances at saka movement, net movement or profit or loss of those balances are not presented as a single line approach under Pfrs 5 if sila ay included as discontinued operations or disposal group or yung mga disposal group or discontinued operations, sila yung mga asset na intended for sale na. So, sila is hindi under Pfrs 5 but they are measured according to previous GAAP or entities previous GAAP and they are presented separately o as separate line items for the asset and liabilities ng disposal group and presented separately as a single line item para sa net movements ng mga balances na yon. So next is Pfrs 10 or consolidated financial statement in investment past 28 investment in associate in joint venture. So it is used or yung Pfrs 10 and past 28 is ginagamit under Pfrs 14 for consistency ng accounting policy. So if ikaw entity if mag-a-apply ka ng equity method or other accounting policy, you need to make a required adjustment ng mga accounting policies mo para sa mga regulatory deferral account balances mo para sa subsidiaries or joint ventures mo for the consistency ng mga accounting policies mo. And for consolidated financial statement, as a parent, pag magko-consolidate ka ng financial statement sa mga subsidiaries mo, so kailangan mo din gumawa ng mga required adjustments sa mga accounting policies mo if meron ka mga regulatory deferral account balances. Again, of course, para sa consistency ng accounting policies. Kasi, so, Pfrs 12 or interest in disclosures of interest in other entities. So, ginagamit lang naman siya for the recognition ng mga regulatory deferral account balances sa mga subsidiaries, associate, and joint ventures. So, in summary, sinasabi lang dyan na if the entity recognize mga regulatory deferral account balances sa mga subsidiaries, joint ventures, and associates because of business combination, so kailangan meron siyang separate disclosures under the requirements of Pfrs 12. So diniscuss ni Miss Alpe yun kanina kung ano mga dapat required na requirements na kailangan sundin para sa disclosures ng mga mga regulatory deferral account balances ng mga subsidiaries, associated and joint ventures na na-recognize ng isang entity. Lang naman yung mga PAS or Pfrs na pwedeng gamitin under Pfrs 14. So, take note that yung mga na-mention above is not only limited. So, ang entity can apply other PAS or Philippine Accounting Standard and Pfrs or Philippine Financial Reporting Standards kapag may mga regulatory deferral account balances sila, as long as they are beneficial or kailangan talaga sa pag-recognize ng mga regulatory deferral account balances. For example, yung PAS 21 or foreign exchange rates. So, pwede siyang gamitin under Pfrs 14 or mga para ma-translate mo yung mga regulatory deferral account balances into foreign currency. So, yun. And let's move on for the last part of my discussion, which is the presentations of mga regulatory deferral account balances. So, we're down for the last part of my discussion, which is the presentation of regulatory deferral account balances. So, we're down to the last part of my discussion, which is the presentation of regulatory deferral account balances. So, dyan, an entity under Pfrs 14 requires 2% is separate line items para sa financial statement of financial position ng total of regulatory deferral debit account balances and it is for the asset under previous GAAP and regulatory deferral account credit balances para naman sa liabilities under the previous GAAP. So, mga naka-separate line items lang sila. So, under the net movements ng regulatory deferral account balances, so an entity may present its net movements of the regulatory deferral account balances separately in other comprehensive income or statement of profit or loss or other comprehensive income, or pwede naman na separately profit or loss. So, for the net movement ng mga regulatory deferral account balances, required ang entity na mag-present ng separate line items para ng mga regulatory deferral account balances para sa So, for the net movements ng mga regulatory deferral account balances, so, separate line items ng mga balances ng mga regulatory deferral accounts na ipapresent mo either in statement of profit or loss or other comprehensive income or separately in profit or loss. So, nag-provide ako ng parang visuals dyan kung for the presentation ng regulatory deferral account balances sa both in a statement of financial position and statement of comprehensive income. So, as you can see dyan sa understatement of financial position, ayun yung sinasabi ko, nakahiwalay or nakaseparate line item or nakaseparate yung account or account title ng regulatory debit account balances under siya ng total assets o ng asset. Then, yung total na ng total assets, ang title niya na is total assets and regulatory deferral account debit balances. And for the equity or liabilities and equity, dyan naman kasama yung regulatory deferral credit balances. So, nakaseparate din siya, kung makikita nyo, pareho silang nakaseparate ng account title. Then, i-include na lang siya for the totals. Kunwari is total liabilities, equity, and regulatory deferral credit balances. And sa presentation naman, statement of comprehensive income or sa profit or loss, makikita nyo na nakaseparate din yung mga regulatory deferral account balances. So, dun sa mga regulatory mga balances under regulatory deferral accounts, ang presentation lang naman niya is mabilis lang. So, isa-separate mo lang. So, pinakita ko lang dyan kung yung visuals or ano yung itsura niya kapag naka-separate line items na siya. To summarize, ang Pfrs 14 is all about regulatory deferral account balances, wherein ito yung mga expenses or income na hindi mo pwedeng i-recognize under asset or liability method because they are subject to rate regulations. Rate regulations ay yung price setting na may rate na or yung mga rates para sa sales of goods and services. Tapos yung na subjected siya or binigay siya or sinet siya ng mga rate regulators. Then sa scope lang naman is ang entity is permitted lang na mag-apply ng Pfrs 14 kapag hindi ka pa nag-a-apply ng any existing Pfrs. So meaning, prohibited ka na gumamit ng Pfrs 14 kapag nag-apply ka na ng other Pfrs. So dapat first time adapter ka. Next is sa mga principle under Pfrs 14. So dapat continuously yung paggamit mo ng previous GAAP natin. And mag-change ka ng accounting policy based sa pag ang information mo is relevant or reliable information, or mas nag-result siya sa relevant or reliable information. And hindi ka pwedeng mag-change ng accounting policy dahil gusto mo lang o dahil mag-recognize ka ng mga regulatory deferral account balances. Meron din tayong mga interactions with other standards, meron tayong past tense events, apply the reporting periods. So, para sa recognition ng mga account adjusting or para ma-recognize mo kung anong doon yung adjusting and non-adjusting events. Past 12 para sa income taxes, para sa recognition or presentation ng mga deferred tax asset and deferred tax liabilities which is presented separately. Past 33 earnings per share para sa calculations ng mga diluted and EPS na excluded or additional presentation na excluded mo yung profit or loss. Past 36 para sa impairment ng asset. So, i-apply mo yung past 36 para malaman mo kung alin dun yung kung kailangan ba siyang i-include sa CGU para sa impairment. Next is Pfrs 3 business combination. So, consistent accounting policy pa din tayo. So, kailangan mong i-recognize mga regulatory deferred account balances mo sa acquiree mo or sa subsidiary mo. And Pfrs 5, so i-apply mo lang yon kapag ang mga regulatory deferred account balances is hindi included sa disposal group or discontinued operation and presented siya din separately. And next is Pfrs 10. So, consolidated financial statement in past 28. So, for the consistent accounting policy din siya. So, kapag mag-a-apply ka ng mga accounting policies, dapat i-a-apply mo din siya sa mga subsidiaries mo, associate and joint ventures. And Pfrs 12, disclosures ng interest in other entities. So, kapag naka-recognize ka ng mga regulatory deferred account balances sa mga subsidiaries mo, so kailangan mo siyang i-present or i-recognize or i-disclose under Pfrs 12 natin na discuss ni Ms. Alpe. And last is for the presentation. So sa presentation lang naman, separate line items lagi tayo. So separate line items sa total regulatory deferral account, debit balances, regulatory deferral account, credit balances, tsaka separate line items sa profit or loss natin, or pwede mo siya i-recognize sa profit or loss, or pwede mo siya i-present yung net movement sa mga regulatory deferred account balances in profit or loss or other comprehensive income.
That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you presenters, thank you board members, Congratulations everyone. Job well done. Thank you. Stay safe.